Chapter 12. Great. Okay, so again, thank you for coming. I'm Bill James. I'm chair of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party. I'm glad to have you here at this meeting. I'm going to start my presentation because it'll remind me to go over the information I want to cover in a more structured way. So let me share the slides. Okay, good. So this is our presentation on becoming a candidate for local office. This program that you responded to in some way is really the first time we've done this particular approach to identifying candidates or potential candidates. And again, if you haven't yet decided that you're ready to do this, that's perfectly fine. This is an early stage event, basically, and a way for you to become aware of what resources are available and just start to think about whether to run and if so, how to do it. And so we're the Santa Clara County Democratic Party, and I'm going to go over what we're going to do. Thanking you for responding to the outreach by the California Democratic Party. California Democratic Party partnered with a group called Contest Every Race. And what we've learned over time is that there are many places, including in California, especially in the Central Valley, but also in pockets of Santa Clara County, which is now predominantly Democratic, where there are entrenched Republican incumbents, and Democrats don't bother running against them because they don't think they can win, they don't think they'll have support. And really throughout the country, and certainly throughout California, we're making an effort to make sure that there's a candidate running in every race, because whatever the office is, local school boards, local city councils, special districts, whatever the office is, we believe that Democratic office holders will make decisions for the people that are consistent with Democratic values, and that's what we're hoping to do. So today we're going to talk about some very basic information about running for local office. When I first looked into this many years ago, it was overwhelming. So, you know, if you're overwhelmed, you're in good company. But at bottom, it's pretty simple, and there are good resources that can help you to do it. So there is a path forward, and any question you have or any obstacle that you see, if it's not fundamental that to your ability to be successful as a candidate, we can help you to overcome. Later on, we're going to send you the slides and links that are presented here, so you can jot down some notes if it helps you be an active listener, but you don't have to worry about capturing all the information. And we'll take questions at the very end, just in case the presentation would cover some of the things that might come up as your questions. And then I just already said as an icebreaker that maybe drop your name and city of residence. And if you're running for office, the office you're already running for, and then a political leader who inspires you, and if you want to say so, why they do. So this is an overview of what we're going to cover. It's these three main parts. We're going to introduce you to what the Santa Clara County Democratic Party is, why we're part of this organization that has been doing outreach for this purpose. We're going to talk about our role in local races, which are, after all, nonpartisan. They're not by party, but why are we the Democrats recruiting candidates? And you're going to hear from our executive director, James Kim, about his role and what the Democratic Party does to help our endorsed local candidates win. We're going to talk a little bit about becoming a candidate, how to decide whether to run, and if so, for which office. We're going to talk about how to lay the groundwork for a campaign. And then we're going to talk about just the mechanics of how to take papers out from the registrar of voters and file them to become a candidate. And then finally, we're going to preview a little bit about how to run and win. I'm happy to answer questions about that at a general level, but that's probably a whole program. So as you get into that phase of exploring this and becoming a candidate, we have ongoing programs to help you with those aspects. But it's just too much information to present in one session. It will definitely overwhelm us if we focus too much on it. So here's the Democratic Party. So the Santa Clara County Democratic Party represents the Democratic Party in Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County has about 2 million residents, about 1 million registered voters, and of those, 500,000 are Democrats. And so it's interesting, the state law, the elections code, establishes some rules around the governance of political parties in California, and every party is sort of a loose collection of county parties, basically every state party. So you have the national party, that's the Democratic National Committee. You have the state parties, including the California Democratic Party, which have this kind of federated relationship with the national party. And then we have a county party in each of the 58 counties of the state of California. And so our party is the Santa Clara County Democratic Party, and we are the Democratic Party in Santa Clara County. We have a governing board called the Central Committee. If you go to our website, which is SCCDP.org, you'll see information about our Central Committee. And the governing board has three main elements. One is a group of members who run for election to the Central Committee. So we're elected at the partisan primary election for the president, because that's the only purely partisan ballot in California. So every 4 years, the presidential primary, way down to the bottom of your ballot, there's a place where you elect Central Committee members from your area. And that's the main source of delegates. But we also have ex officio members. So our assembly members, state senators, and members of Congress are all, who are Democrats, are all members of our Central Committee. And then finally, we have more than 20, I think we may have 24 or 25 Democratic clubs that are chartered Democratic clubs. And those clubs each have one representative to our Central Committee. All told, our Central Committee has 82 or 84 members, which is quite a large Central Committee, but it reflects the size of Santa Clara County and the many Democrats we have. Our operations, so that's governance, our operations are led by James Kim, Executive Director, who's going to speak in a little bit about his role and how we all work together to help candidates. And James, among other things, has been in charge of our permanent headquarters office at 2901 Moore Park in San Jose. So the local Democratic Party has the exclusive right to give the official Democratic Party endorsement in local races that are wholly within our county. So all of the cities within Santa Clara County, all of the school districts that don't cross county boundaries, and there are many of them, and some of the special districts like the Water Board and the El Camino Healthcare District and open space districts, things like that. So what do we do in the Democratic Party? One thing is we have a formal endorsement process. And so that's the structure of that is that we have an appointed endorsement committee. They write up a questionnaire and send it to candidates, and you complete the questionnaire, and then the endorsement committee calls you in and conducts an interview. Eventually, and based on all the information they gather, the endorsement committee makes a recommendation to the full Central Committee, and the Central Committee votes on endorsements. So the timeline for that is this year that the open period for filing as a candidate starts in July, or may just have started recently. And so you can get papers, pull them, start to file for office, and you have to file by August. And so once that timeline is done, we start sending out our endorsement questionnaire, ask a lot of questions just to make sure that the candidates, we only send it to registered Democrats. We make sure that you have, Democratic perspectives on the issues, and then we do interviews and pick a candidate for each race that we're going to support in. I mentioned we have a permanent office at 2901 Moore Park Avenue in San Jose. That's open, been open year-round in recent years, and they field inquiries from the general public about the Democratic Party. And then as election time ramps up, they focus on doing campaign efforts that James will talk about a little bit. Some of the efforts we've done there include sending slate mailers out. So if you get the endorsement of the Democratic Party, you can be on a slate mailer with all the Democratic office holders running in your area. And our hope is that Democratic voters will at least consider that to be relevant information as they pick who they're going to vote for, especially in down ballot races. We do advertising on the internet and through our social media channels. And we have had in recent years neighborhood captains who take 100 pieces of literature, like a door hanger with our slate, for example, and go in their neighborhood and hang them on doors or knock on doors and talk to people if they're comfortable with that, based on the kind of the state of COVID and health concerns. And then in addition, we do phone banks, texting, and postcards and other activities that are more directed to it's like I think of it as our foreign policy. We have Democrats as assembly members and state senators and members of Congress from Santa Clara County, but we have a lot of purple areas in the Central Valley, and the control of the House of Representatives is really won or lost at one seat at a time. And so we try to pick a couple of seats in sort of crossover areas, purple areas, where we can try to influence the outcome and get more Democrats elected. So here's some of the information that might be most relevant to you. It's how do you become a candidate? I chose this image from the PowerPoint, like stock images. It's got the orange candidate out in front here, in front of everybody, ready to get, take all the heat. That's a little bit true. When you're a leader, you do put yourself in that position. But if you do things in the right way, I think you have a strong group of supporters around you and can be successful. So in this part of the program, we're going to talk about, or my presentation, we're going to talk about becoming a candidate. First of all, deciding whether to run and for which office. And then if you decide that you might want to run, laying the groundwork to run, and there wouldn't be much time to do that for 2022, but there's some time. And then finally, the mechanics to pull and file the papers. So becoming a candidate. So first is deciding whether to run. The first question you got to ask yourself is, what's your motivation? You want to think about like why you might think to run. What do you have to offer? What's not being done now that you think could be done better? What concerns do you have? What issues do you wish people were addressing or addressing in a different way? So make sure you have that motivation, because it takes some energy and commitment to run. And when you have a day when somebody has not been as supportive of you as you would like, or when you feel like you're out there alone trying to do this, it's good to remember, okay, I'm doing this for the kids, or I'm doing this for that traffic stop on the corner, or whatever it is that's motivating you. Think about the need. If you think that there's a special district near you with healthcare, and you'd be interested in being on that board, but go look at the board. And if it turns out that people that you think are reasonable and capable and are making good decisions, well, you don't need to run for that. But many times if you look at it, you'll think, you know what, they're not paying attention to a certain aspect that I think I would help draw some attention to. So consider whether there's a need for you to run particularly. You have to think about what support you would get. And so, do you have friends or family or other networks that will help you run? Like, who would help you? Just start to think about it. If you really ask them, who would step up and help you? You might be connected to people in your neighborhood. Like if you told your neighbors you could make that park down the street be cleaned up, you thought you could do that. Would some of them say, oh yeah, I'll help you? What are the things you're active in? Are you active in a church or like your neighborhood association, Little League, other sports organizations? You're a teacher, so that you have parents and students that you've met over the years, whatever the source of support might be, coworkers, and think about like who might actually support you in your run, either by giving you some time or using their networks to help you get the word out, or maybe giving you a donation to do some of the basic things that are helpful to do as a candidate. And then finally, availability. Can you run right now, in your life? Are you caring for somebody that makes it hard to do that? Are you in a place like emotionally where you feel like I'm going to be able to do this because I'm in a strong place right now? Or, are you making a big life change in coming years? Just make sure that you feel like you can make the commitment to run and to serve, because it is a big commitment of time and energy. So that's the first step. So here are some of the ideas that we have in the tools for how to decide whether to run. I think that probably a very useful place to start, if you don't already have in mind like a specific jurisdiction that you might want to run for, is to find your own list of local offices. So the most convenient place I found to do this is the SCCVote.org webpage, which is by our Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters. So if you put in your own address, it will give you the list of offices that you're eligible to vote for. And that is, so any one of the offices that you're eligible to vote for means that as a registered voter in that district for that office, you could in theory run for that office. And so SCCVote.org, it's a good place of resources for a bunch of stuff. You should poke around it, because as a candidate, people will say, well, how do I know if I'm registered? Or I don't remember if I'm registered or not, or I'm not sure whether I'm in your district. Well, the easiest thing is to go to this place and look at the tools there to check all of that out for themselves. Another very good, so that's a place to find out what are the districts what are the offices I could run for. Then if you start to be interested in an office, you should look at past election results. And so for most of the offices that would be up in 2022, you would want to look at 2018 election results, November 2018, who was running that, or even June of 2018 in the primary. Who was running for this office? Who got elected? How many votes did they get? How many people ran against them? And that's gives you a sense of like, well, am I going to have to get 100,000 people to vote for me? I think the answer is no, except for like countywide office. But it varies quite a bit depending on the district and the body that you're running for. but you can see those past election results. You can see them to fine granularity. If you're like a really obsessive data person, you can get a spreadsheet from the Registrar of Voters public website that would let you go down to the precinct level and look at like individual neighborhoods. Like, why aren't people bothering to vote for the school board in my part of the district? You can think about that and start to address that. That's a source of information. Then there are campaign finance filings. This is for people who want to know, like, it's a big office. How much money would I need to raise to run for this office? You can look at the Cal Access database on the Secretary of State website. You can see how much money candidates who've run for this race successfully previously raised. You shouldn't be discouraged, because some candidates are successful because they raised a lot of money, and some candidates are successful for other reasons, even though they raised relatively little money. But you can at least get a sense of the range of information. And it's all public sources. It doesn't cost you anything other than some time. Other research. You want to research to check out the governing board that you might be running for. They probably have a website. So a school district's a good example, or a city council. How do they talk about themselves? Who are the current members? What can you find out by looking at the website? Obviously, the schedule for meetings and the agendas. You want to look at that to see what they've been addressing. They might have recorded meetings because all of us have been meeting on Zoom. So even before that, they were often publishing or being recorded to be sent out on public access TV. So you might be able to see some meetings, observe them by looking at recordings. And then finally, news reports about the board and social media from the board and from others talking about the board. So just doing some research to start to understand, what are the issues, what are the dynamics, what are the personalities, who seems to be a good leader on this board, and who seems to be a leader that I think maybe should be worked on replacing. You want to attend meetings or view them online. It's a question that comes up when people ask you to support, well, how many meetings have you gone to? So someone texted you to get you interested in this program. And so maybe you have not been going to your school board meeting every week or every month or whatever it is. And that's fair and reasonable. You can easily go back and view some. And once you decide on a seat you're going to run for, you should start to attend pretty regularly, so you get a sense of the issues and how people interact. And then finally, talk to an inner circle of friends and family. Don't let them talk you out of it unless they're right, because if you have good friends and family, when you say, I'm going to run for public office, they might say, oh, why would you do that? People are going to criticize you, and it's really public and it's really hard. But talk to them in a genuine way and find out, hey, if I feel this were important to me, would you be able to support me? Am I right that it would be good if the school district addressed school safety or whatever it is issue is that you want to address? And that's just like your initial inner circle of people. Like, will they be backing you? Do you get a good vibe about that? So the second part of the program I want to talk about is, in the second kind of phase, once you decide to run, would be laying the groundwork. And I realized as I did these slides that I had put money in here twice, and I decided to leave it, because the reason why it's in the second time is that it's like the thing people like doing least. If you're a halfway normal person, I mean, if you were in sales maybe, or in fundraising for nonprofits, then raising money for a good cause, which is investment in yourself, or an entrepreneur, then maybe that wouldn't be so hard for you. But for many candidates, they find it uncomfortable. You're asking friends and family to put up some cash for you to pursue kind of your dream. And unless you happen to be like independently wealthy, you'll want to do that. And you'll need to do that at least to some degree to have some resources. So you want to start to do that. It will also get you into conversations with people who should be your supporters and who should also give you time. But start with friends and family that are easier to ask, and then reach out from there. You want to recruit close family and friends and others to help you in the campaign. If you've been going to school board meetings and you haven't been happy with how something's being addressed, and you know that other people have had the same concerns, talk to them and say, hey, I'm thinking of running, but I would need some help. Will you commit to, spending a little time on Saturdays walking with me to talk to voters? Just get people to make a little bit of a commitment, start to ask them. You want to reach out to your broader network. So the previous phase of kind of deciding whether to run, you talk to your inner circle, but you want to start to reach out to a broader group of people. You want to let people know you're running, and then start to try to draw them in, try to get their commitment to using their networks to expand your reach to other voters, because person to person word of mouth is one of the strongest ways to get a good voter contact. You want to meet with stakeholders, and you should meet with everybody. You want to meet with the people, even the people you might disagree with. So you want to meet with the school superintendent if it's a school board. You want to meet with the city manager if it's a city. You want to meet with all the current office holders who will meet with you, and start to explore with them why they ran, why think about why you're running. And of course, if it's somebody who's like already your worst opponent on the board, or somebody you might be running against, you wouldn't meet with them perhaps, but other stakeholders you want to meet with. And think about who they might be. If it's a school district, you want to meet with the teachers' representatives and parents organizations, and just start making a list and work through it. They'll want to meet with you. So you'll be reaching out to them cold. You might not know them, but if you're saying, hey, I'm a candidate for the school board, or I'm a candidate for town council, or whatever it is, they'll want to meet with you because they'll want to know who you are, and they'll want to start to find out and get a sense of you as a person. And so you can use those opportunities to start to get information about how to run, what the concerns are, what the dynamic is. And for those people for whom it's appropriate to ask this, you can get an endorsement. So the superintendent or the city manager works for the board. They're not going to give endorsements to candidates, but other candidates who feel you might be good to replace somebody, or you might be good to fill a vacancy, might give your endorsement. Which leads to the last two bullets: is never forget to ask for money, and never forget to ask for an endorsement, even if you think it won't be forthcoming. If you ask a person you just met for an endorsement, you say, I'd like to know what I would need to do to get your endorsement, then they'll tell you. They'll say, I don't ever endorse. Or they'll say, well, I only endorse people after I've known them for a while. And then you want to get to know them for a while. You want to talk to them more. Or I only endorse people who share my values in these following specific ways. And if you in your genuine values align with theirs, you can talk about that. Asking for money is hard. You just have to do it. And if you don't do it, you won't get it. If you don't ask for money, you won't get it. And so when you have conversations with people about running, you should include that and practice with somebody who knows you really well and won't dislike you for asking. And you'll see that it becomes easier over time. And the people who don't give money to candidates will tell you that. And some people might grudgingly give you a little bit of money, but other people will give you money and surprise you. So you never know if you don't ask. And again, we'll take questions at the end, because by now you must be accumulating them. Now the mechanics to pull and file papers to run. So the place you want to start when you get to this point about running. So I think that the window for opening, I'm sorry, I meant to confirm the date. I think I saw James nod earlier, but I think that window is already open or just about to open. And so you should be able to go now to the Registrar of Voters website. And it's a pretty good website for a public government website. And you should find information about the elections. And there's two sites. One that has kind of election information that's sort of like results, including the past results. There's another section about upcoming elections, and they include pages about candidate information. And the registrar tries to anticipate your questions. So they have a written candidate guide that tells you the mechanics to file for office, and what you have to start with, what you have to do. And again, when you first look at that, it looks really complicated and hard. But if you think about it, a bunch of people have done it. And so you can do it. You can I don't know any of you, but I'm sure you can figure it out. Start with a candidate guide. Make a friend at the registrar's office by calling them or going down there and talking to the clerks, because their mission in life is to have safe and fair and open elections, and to facilitate those by having candidates who are qualified to run for office be able to do that. So read the candidate guide, look at the information that's on the website, start to think about your list of questions about what to do. Then you will have to go down to the registrar to pull papers. You sign something when you pull the papers, and so you physically go down to the registrar's office on Burger Drive. And that's good, because it gives you your first chance to go in and see how helpful and supportive the registrar's staff are. They do this for a living. They don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or whatever you are. They want to support you in exploring running for public office and filling out your paperwork. Now you want to be ready to go public, which means that you want to feel like, you'll see that you might already see now, as people pull papers to explore running, their basic information gets published in a periodically updated list at the registrar's site. So you want, you want to have talked to everybody that you'd want to talk to before you start to go public. And you also want to have like an email address and a phone number that you can expose publicly, something that you can kill later if you want to, after you get elected, or if you don't get elected. So a good thing to do is to start a Google account or some other account that would have an email address that's specific for purpose of running. And then you also want to maybe do a Google Voice number. So your Google Voice number can be forwarded to your own cell number, and you can make phone calls from your computer from it. And then if eventually you no longer want to be in touch with the people who've gotten connected with you through that number, you can just kill it. So be ready to go public, but you do want to put contact information, because the whole thing is to let people, to get connected with people who can support you, to get connected with people who can endorse you, to talk to reporters so that they can write articles about you. And so you want to have some kind of email address and phone number that people who want to reach out to you can do that. Then you complete the forms. The candidate guide will tell you, the person at the registrar's office will go over it. And one of the things you'll probably have to do is gather signatures for like a petition. So you want to go to your neighbors who are registered voters and get them to say, yes, we want Bill to be able to run for this office. And they'll tell you how many signatures you need. And then you want to get about like 50% more than that, because we're always surprised that they don't match for some reason. So for example, my name is registered as William James. And if I forget and sign a voting petition, Bill James, I don't know that they would honor it if the signature didn't match, or they might not realize that Bill is just a variant of William. Whatever it is, for whatever reason, there's always some signatures that we think are valid that the registrar doesn't immediately validate. So if you need 20 valid signatures, turn in 25 or 30, then you'll know you're going to be good. And they'll contact you and tell you, yeah, that's the right number. We checked them and they're good. So file early is another thing you can do. If you file like a week beforehand, within a few days, they'll call you and tell you, yeah, your signatures are good. And then if they say, no, you've turned in 30, but we found 11 of them to be bad, and you need one more, then you can run around to get the 11th one. And then finally, you file the forms and you take the oath. This is probably the coolest thing, the single coolest thing, other than being sworn into office as an office holder, because they actually make you take an oath to run as a candidate. And I think it focuses us on the fact that we are committing to public service as a candidate, and if we're successful as an office holder. And but it makes a good photo opportunity for your website or social media. So you want to go down in a shirt that you're presentable in, and you raise your hand and take the oath. And while you're doing that, and the registrar's employee is there, you might want them on the screen, but you want to have your hand on the papers and your hand in the air, and have somebody with you that can take a good photo for you. That's just like, you have to think ahead to that kind of thing as you run as a candidate. Okay, how to run and win. And we're almost to the point where we can take your individual questions. It would be hard to do this in great depth in one session, but I want to cover at least the highlights, just to make you feel like it's not rocket science and you can do it. So the first thing, you want to think about your positions and policies. So looking at past agendas for your governing board that you're running for example, or for your town council, if you haven't already, think about what people might ask you about. Like, well, oh yeah, what do you think about the dog park? Like, should we have a dog park, and who's going to pay for it? And that's which neighborhood is it going to be in? That's the kind of thing you want to think ahead to. You also want to think ahead and rehearse. What do you say when you know it's going to be controversial, but you don't know the answer? You have to have like you want to be perceived as a thoughtful and serious person. You say, you know what, I haven't looked at that issue, but give your contact information to my campaign manager, or give me your email address, and I'm going to look into it and get back to you. Or, well, what are your concerns about that? You're asking about it, and I'm curious to know your position and concerns, and you can start to get a sense of these issues. Rallying supporters. You want to figure out who will help you do this. It's much easier to do it with some help. When you have like a whole neighborhood that you want to talk to, it's easy. I mean, it's hard, one thing to go to 100 doors yourself. If you go with 10 people, we said we're each going to talk to 10 doors. Some people might not be home. One of the people might find somebody who says, well, I really want to talk to Bill. I want to talk to the candidate, and they can text you and you can come over. It's more fun and less stressful to do this with help. You want to get endorsements. You want to get endorsements from individuals and from organizations. From individuals, the thing to do is to figure out who are the people who might impress other people if they endorsed you. So if you're running for town council from a certain district in your city, and there's a neighborhood association, if people who are leaders in the neighborhood association will endorse you, if the association has a process and they'll endorse you, those are things to consider. Other office holders in the same office or lower or upper offices within the same jurisdiction can be important. And again, you have to reach out and ask people, do you endorse in races in my town? And if so, what would you, how would I start that process? How could I be considered? Because I think I think you might, once you learn about me and my positions and qualifications, you might be prepared to support me. And then you want to go talk to voters. You want to knock on doors and do outreach and talk to voters. So let's see how to run and win. Let's see here, and then we're going to talk to questions in a minute. James Kim, if you can be ready after this slide. I slipped over my slide that was supposed to trip me to introduce you and give you a chance to talk about what you do and how what resources we use to support candidates. So let me cover this slide. I'm going to have James do that, and then we'll almost be to the point where we're ready for questions. So talking to voters. So the single most important thing is to talk to voters or to communicate to voters in some meaningful way. So if you're running for the whole county or like a giant city like San Jose, you would need to have a lot of money because you need to mail to voters, but you also need to have time to go door to door. If you if you have a full-time job, you have to think every day from like the end of my job at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever it is until dark. I'm gonna, or as close to dark as seems comfortable to talk to voters. I'm gonna knock on doors. I'm gonna do it as much as I can. Every weekend, I'm gonna let people know I'm not traveling. I'm not going to the beach. I'm knocking on doors, because you have to do that. That's a commitment you have to make. You can hire consultants who will help you make a plan to do that. If you have a well-funded campaign, you might be able to get a volunteer to help you think about it. You might know enough about your local community to do it yourself. You can pay for commercial data sources because you don't want to talk to non-voters and you don't want to talk to people who might be registered but never vote. You can pay for commercial data sources, and they're available from a couple of sources. You just like PDI is the source that the Democratic Party uses. But it's also possible to, as a candidate, once you've filed your paperwork and taken that oath, you can go to the Registrar of Voters website and ask for a voter file for your district. So they'll send you a voter file. And if you, it's a few $100s, so it's not free, but it's also not thousands of dollars. And you can use that if you select the options to get the information. You can see who voted in past elections. Now, of course, you can't see how they voted, but they do keep track of participation. So if you have limited time and want to make sure you talk to the Democrats who usually vote, you can figure that information out by putting this data in a spreadsheet and sorting it. And so if you don't have that skill, then one of those people you talked to earlier when you're getting ready to run hopefully would, and you can get them to do it for you. There are various communication platforms. You can get one website from Google that doesn't cost you anything. You have a Gmail account, you can get a Google site, and they've got tools to upload information and templates that you can put it in. And so if you're running for a really small school board or a very small local jurisdiction or a special district, that might be enough. But it also doesn't cost that much for the short time you would be running to have a campaign-focused tool like Nation Builder. If you check out Nation Builder, they've got pre-made campaign websites that you can use, and the monthly fees or the periodic fees are not super high, so it's worth checking that out, and I'd recommend doing at least that. You might be able to get BillJames2022.com as a domain, and then you can take a pre-made website like Nation Builder, pick the version of it that you want to use, kind of the template you feel like matches your style and campaign themes, and then point that to your the domain. So registering a domain is something you can easily do. Of course, people reach a lot of people on social media now. So if you have that as a skill and you have a big network already, you can build on that. You might want to consider making a politician page for your campaign that's not your friends who you talk to about your cute dog or anything, but is instead focused on your more serious aspects and particularly this office. And if you're not good at that, don't worry about it. You probably do know people who do know about it and participate in that. And if you don't, you probably have people in your family or people in your network who know people who do, or have kids who do, or whatever it is. You can find somebody to do this for you. You want to get free or earned attention. I guess media is kind of a strong term. You might get in the paper or the local paper, but you want to get exposure, I guess is probably the better term. You want people to know you're running and to know you're a good candidate and to know that you're out in the community. So you need to figure out public events to go to. You want to go to park events and any whatever's most relevant to your jurisdiction and most current and most well attended in the area that you're running in. And then, of course, you can stage events. You can have campaign events that, you want to have a dog park event that people bring their dogs to, and you talk about how important it is. Look how many of us have dogs and we want to have a dog park in our town. And so, just you think about ways to get the local media, any media outlet needs content. And if you create an opportunity for there to be content and for them to highlight an issue, and if your picture could be in it in your name, then that helps you as a candidate. You haven't spent any money or much. And then the endorsements we've already talked about, how to get endorsements from elected officials and community leaders. You want to think about who are the people who are perceived as leaders in this community. I want to go talk to all of them. Some of them many of them are going to say no, or that I don't do that, but some will endorse you. And you want to build that list of endorsements. Don't neglect that, because you might think, I don't want to ask people to endorse me. I'm just going to get my message out. But too many voters, or enough voters, give weight to endorsements that if you ignore it, your opponents will get the endorsements and it'll look like they're supported and you're not. So you want to ask people to do this for you. And organizations typically have a process. The Democratic Party process I mentioned, some of the Democratic clubs also endorse. And so they would have a process. You want to start to investigate who all can endorse me and what's the process to go through to do that. And then finally, candidate forums. You want to make sure everybody knows that's why contact information is important. The League of Women Voters or the PTA, whatever it is, groups will conduct candidate forums, and you want to make sure you're on the stage, and you'll get better and better at them. Don't worry if you're not already great at it. So in a minute, we're going to take questions, but first we're going to hear from Executive Director James Kim. Then I'm going to give you our contact information for questions that don't get answered here today. And then the rest of the time is devoted to, taking your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so you all can see James better. And James Kim is the Executive Director of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party. And my role as chair is to be the overall leader of the party, and I run the governing board and makes the decisions about endorsements and things like that. And then James and I work together to do the operational stuff that he's about to talk about, which is what do we do, in campaign time and beyond to make things happen. So James.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. So I don't have to spend that much time on what I'm doing. Bottom line is this. So under the bill's direction of the Central Committee of the Santa Clara County Democrats, they make the decision, including the endorsing the right candidate through a rigorous process, which I believe is fair. Once the decision is made, I get to take over and implement those decisions, hopefully turn out as many Democratic voters as possible to elect our endorsed candidates. Now, before I move forward, can I get a show of hands of people who is going to be running this year? If you're sure, can you raise your hand? Or, it could be for the future, but I just want to know how far we're up to speed on it. Chris seems like he's ready to raise his hand. Well, maybe not this time. I know I talked to Yuko. I think she's probably going to take some time studying. And I talked to Evan, and he's probably going to study as well, too. But if we don't have anybody who's running this particular year, I think maybe you could help me, because I think you have a time to get yourself ready, but I could prepare myself to help potentially you if you get endorsed by the Central Committee. So let me send a couple of, you could all see the chat, right? Let me send you a couple of survey questions right before I tell you what I do to help our endorsed candidates. So if you could kind of take a look while listening to me, that would be great. So once the endorsement gets processed through the Central Committee, I use our resources, including volunteers and monetary contributions that we gather, donations we gather, to send out a voter's guide to our Democratic voters. We have about approximately 500,000 registered voters in this county. Of course, if we had enough funding, we could send out the message to all of them. We don't. So in order to accommodate the low amount of money that we have to mail it out, we ask the volunteers to literally drop those voters guide. So these survey that I'm asking you is literally about those. Well, first of all, once you receive them either through mail or through social media or text banking or by a volunteer who we're recommending, what's the chance of you voting for our candidate? what's the likelihood? Especially if you don't know the candidate. Of course, that's just one question following up by, are you willing to drop these? Are you willing to volunteer for us for our endorsed candidate when the time comes? Now, those are the ways that I try to get the Democratic voters out into the polls, or lately I guess it's all mostly done through the mail, right? Last time in the primary for June primary, we had approximately 37% voter turnout. That's pretty low. My goal is to increase that every single time with the help from volunteers and with help from the central committee, which does fundraising for us. So with that said, I don't think I need to go forward. Would it be possible for you to reply on a chat with these numbers? So I'm seeing Tammy has answer one survey as 5, and Evan has, I'm guessing 4 and 2 is survey 1 and 2. Is that correct? So this will kind of give me some ideas. So if you are willing to run for an office, it does take some special efforts. It does take certain type of work. But here's something I'm replying to a generic question that I actually received when I was making some calls. So what does a party do versus a candidate in terms of campaigning? The way I see it is this: no matter how much campaigning we do from the party, I would say we can't change more than 5 points for your campaign. Bottom line is you're gonna have to do a whole bunch of them so we could supplement what you do as a candidate. If you take a look at 2020 Biden's campaign, we know we have done a lot of work behind the scenes for the Biden campaign. But you as a public most likely saw Biden's advertising, not from the Democratic Party. Basically, that's how it works. We don't promote, just follow us. We promote a candidate. So you, as a candidate, you are the one who needs to be in public. You are the one who's going to make those decisions. And you are the ones that they are going to be voting for. Our job at the party is to tell our Democratic voters, especially the people that our candidate did not outreach to, because obviously you can't reach out to every voters, to those segment of voters and tell them this is why, and this is the candidate that we're supporting. So I hope that sort of give you some answers to the questions. Do you have a special question for me at this particular time? Can I see a hand?
So James, I think we're going to, we're just about to take questions. We're going to open the forum and do that. And so people can start to think if you have a question for either me or James, and we're happy to answer them. So James, I saw one question in the chat about how to volunteer if you don't want to run as a candidate. So I think we can put a link there to connect. And then it's important to know that you can always reach out to us. So I'll put our email addresses again in the chat. Mine is chair@sccdp.org, and James's is ED, which stands for Executive Director @sccdp.org. And so if you have questions after the fact, we want you to be involved. It's the hardest thing to do to get candidates to run, especially in certain offices and jurisdictions, and also to get people to help us with campaigns. And so, reaching out, if you're most interested in volunteering, probably James Kim is the right person to contact. And if you're most interested in being a candidate, but we don't get to your question today, or you want to have kind of a private conversation about it before you commit or start to explore it, then reaching out is probably best. But if you have a question, feel free to either speak up, because we're a small group, or raise your hand and we'll recognize you. But if you have a question for either me or James, we'd be happy to answer them. And then if you're not on our list, we should make sure that you're all on our list. We'll send you something to do that, because you'll become aware of events that we have and meetings. So we have a picnic in July. We have a fundraising dinner at Hayes Mansion in September. And I would say that if you want to get engaged or check out getting engaged, you should just start to show up at some of these events and meet people. And if you've gotten this far, where you're at this meeting today, either from an interest in running or potentially running, or from an interest in getting active in Democratic Party politics, you'll find somebody in some context that works for you. There's just a lot of different things. I'm pretty confident that if you check things out, you'll find a way and a place that that works for you. We got a bunch of Democratic clubs, we've got individual campaigns. The other thing is, and I want to give people, I'm going to just be quiet long enough for people to ask a question. If you're not ready to run yet, we gave you a lot of information today about how to check out running. So if there's like a gap, like a vacancy, like somebody turned out, or there's a real problem and you really want to run, you could jump in. It's not too late. But it's also the case that if you might want to do this and you just hadn't given it any thought until somebody reached out to you, it's also good to think of that as a 2-year cycle, right? Start going to the board now and when you can, and pay attention to it. So that you can start to figure out, where opportunities are. I see Bob's question, and then I'm going to let people just call out and ask their question. Bob asked about where are Republicans strong now? And it's probably good to learn about if it's probably good to think about individual office holders. We know we have access to the data to know whether office holders are registered as Republicans or not, but there are some surprising pockets. So randomly, the Milpitas School Board has more Republicans than Democrats, even though it's a Democratic area. And they're not bad people. I know some of them, but as a Democratic Party chair, I would feel more comfortable and would rather that they be Democrats. And when we find, by the way, a Republican office holder for a local office who is not expressing the kind of vitriol that we see in the National Republican Party and seems more aligned with our values, we talk to them about that and say, well, this is why we're Democrats, and if you agree with that, maybe you should consider becoming a Democrat. But people usually have a reason for what they're doing. So in Santa Clara County, school board in Milpitas randomly has Republicans. City council in smaller and more affluent communities can have more Republicans, like Palo Alto and Los Altos and Mountain View all have all Democrats. And even Los Altos Hills has a couple of Democrats, but there are some Republicans in Los Altos Hills. And in Monte Sereno and some communities like Saratoga and even Los Gatos. And so, if you have a question about specific jurisdictions, reaching out to us, privately and asking about that would be a way to explore that. And then there's always vacancies. There's always the need to recruit people to run for vacancies. People who've been in office a long time, they might be term limited out, or they might just get to the point where they're ready to retire. And school boards, often families, like parents, will run when their kids are in the schools, serve for a while, and then their kids age out of the schools and they're less interested and they'll drop off. And so we want to always have good Democrats to run there. And then the other thing in terms of volunteering is we do have my foreign policy. So we're working to help a guy named assembly member named Rudy Salas get elected in the Central Valley to get rid of David Valadeo, who's an actual cousin of Devin Nunes and a real conservative Republican. So their area is kind of even 50-50 Democrats and Republicans, and the Democrats have had a hard time sustaining election of a Democrat there, but we're working to try to tip the balance there. So any other questions?
Go ahead, actually, can I add a couple of more things following up with Bob's question?
Yeah.
I've actually heard, Gilroy is another area that we tend to have a lot more.
Yeah, we go right. Good point.
But in general, this is a comment that I heard from a few people from the Republican side. So the Republican side this is a rumor, of course, because I don't belong to that party. I was told by multiple people that they are actually trying to get people onto the school boards. This is where the school board, as an elected school board, a lot of the people who's elected there tend to go into the city council. From the city council, you tend to go into the state or the federal legislators. So they are trying to build a pipeline into it. So if you're worried, I mean, we should be worried because other side is not just gonna sit still either. So just like what we're doing, we're trying to recruit candidates and volunteers. Republican side is doing the similar thing, except that we're much better in this county. But you have to remember, in year 2000, I think in January, up to January, we used to have a Republican Congress member right in the smack in the middle of Silicon Valley. So, and our volunteers and good candidates actually flipped that around. Gentleman named Campbell. Mike Honda at the time, I believe, was recruited by President Clinton to run for the seat when he vacated. So to end that, the answer to the question about Bob, we definitely need all of your help, everybody's help, to make sure that we cover all of the county, because the other side has figured out that you start low. This is how you become a congressman.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's scary actually. If you, I wouldn't recommend it, but the Silicon Valley Association of Republican Women, which sounds like a bunch of old ladies who thought Ronald Reagan was handsome, but it's a scary organization that has, they have programs regularly to get people to run for a school board. They tell them to hide who they are, to talk about school safety and talk about environmental hazards at school. If you look at the website, it's a bunch of anti-vaccine stuff. It's a bunch of anti-LGBTQ sentiment. This whole ridiculous thing about critical race theory. They're worried about the schools criticizing white people, having white kids feel criticized at school because they're teaching about racial justice and racial history in America. And my kids are teenagers and have been going through school, and they're learning to be critical thinkers and open-minded people. So it is the case that there's organized people trying to get fairly bad people elected to school boards. So if you have any kind of halfway mainstream views about these things, you would be a better candidate than they are. So if people don't have questions that are of general interest, Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, my internet connection blipped out for a minute, and I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about the Democratic clubs that are around the area, like what is.
Yeah, that's a great resource. So if you go to SCCDP.org, our main party website, and it's kind of like a little bit old in its organization. It's an inexpensive one because we try to be economical with our resources, but it has a bunch of menus. I think there's like an about or information tab that you can find information about the Democratic clubs, and there's a listing. And I encourage you, if you're not already a member of one of these clubs, it's easy to become a member. And there's, there are some that are based on affinity, like, there's an Asian American, an APA Democratic Club. There's a couple different Latino Democratic clubs. There's a Democratic Activists for Women Now, which a lot of women and kind of feminists are part of. And then there's kind of like countywide ones like the Silicon Valley Democratic Club and the Peninsula Democratic Club is kind of the north part of the county. South County Democratic Club for Gilroy and Morgan Hill. But I encourage you to join one of those and go to check out one of their meetings, because that's a good place to find like-minded people who are already working in politics. And if whether you're going to be a candidate or want to be a volunteer, they're good places to get connected. And they're all listed on the county party website. And if you're from a place that doesn't have a club, you could even start a club. It's not hard to do.
I'm near the Orchard City one.
Yeah, Orchard City. This is a good example. Now, Orchard City Indivisible is an indivisible group. And after that, you remember Indivisible and Swing Left and all these groups that started after Trump, we're all working pretty well together now. I know all the leaders from Orchard City Indivisible, and we support each other's programs. And that is a good supportive group. They meet weekly usually, and recently they've been meeting in a hybrid way. And their meetings are great and substantive, and I find to be very supportive and inspiring. So that would be a good group to be involved with. They're not chartered as the Democratic Party Club, but people identify as Democrats and we're trying to help Democrats be elected. So it would be also good to check out maybe the Silicon Valley Democratic Club. A lot of Campbell area folks are in that club. But just go to some of the meetings. They're often easy to attend on with Zoom time and check out and see if they are addressing issues that resonate with you and seem to be people that you kind of identify with and communicate with. Well, James and I, it's approaching 1 o'clock. I have an exciting, I'm going to answer Bob's question about Saratoga in a minute. I have an exciting trip today. I'm going to drive my son out to Turlock, and we're checking out as Cal State University, Stanislaus County. So it's going to be a fun day for us. And I promised him I would end at 1 so that we could be on the road. But so Saratoga area, I think that the club that would be most active there would be the Silicon Valley Democratic Club. I don't want to assume anything from your surname, Bob, but you could also consider checking out the APA Democratic Club. They have an event next week, in fact, at our headquarters. So maybe we'll email information about that.
Coming Monday.
Yes, on Monday. That's right, Monday at our Moore Park office. Yeah, the clubs, I think just kind of checking them out and seeing which address issues in which communities. So. Okay, well, good. Well, we're going to end there. And so again, I think James put ED SCCDP.org in the chat, and I'm chair at SCCDP.org. I think you have some of our contact information from the outreach that was done to you. I really appreciate, it's nice of you, the people who put in chat, appreciating our time. We are volunteers, by the way, James and I both, and we're committed to this work, obviously, and we are always looking for ways to increase the circle of people who are engaged in the work, because we know there's a lot of good Democratic people in our Santa Clara County, and the more people who get involved, the easier it is for all of us to get this work done. And for those who might be thinking, or who are intrigued by the text they got and thought, oh, maybe I could be a candidate. If all of this seems to make it seem hard, it was meant to be information that would make it seem doable. I can assure you it can be done. I know lots and lots and lots of people have done it, and we could give you some advice. And some, if you get the endorsement, then some support. It starts with figuring out like what you want to run for and whether it makes sense. Having a conversation with me or with James about that is a good idea. We can schedule a time to talk together, pull that list for you individually from the registrar and say, okay, these are your office holders. And you say, well, I want to be in Congress, and we'll point out to you why that's not the place to start. A couple of good reasons, but good chance that we could find something for you to do. And then, you'd be on our radar and you'd be engaged with us. It might be that you'd end up being on the park commission, first. Somebody on city council can help you get on the planning commission. We know the paths that work, and can give you advice about a long-term plan to get engaged and find a place to run. And your inclination to do it might mean that there's something else you can do through democratic politics that would help you feel like you're fulfilling that desire to be involved in the community in this particular way. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for putting this very helpful information. Yeah. I had a question around the Democratic Party endorsement process. Would I be in case I end up signing up papers and decide to run, would I be notified for the interview, or is that something that I should initiate on my behalf?
That's a very good question. So one of my earlier slides, I said you wanted to be ready to go public, and when you do your papers, they'll ask you very specifically, can we publish this? Can we publish that? If you want to include at least an email address, and ideally also a phone number. In our case, as people file for public office, we check the list, look them up their party registration, and for all the Democrats, we reach out to them and ask them to participate in our process. But we use the information they put on that sheet. And so you want to have some kind of address that you're going to be checking, or some phone number that you're going to be reachable at, because we'll reach out to you to talk about being involved. It's also possible to be proactive, which I recommend. And so for the Democratic Party, you can email me, or you can email the endorsement chair. And the format is the same as the other ones, which is endorse@sccdp.org. And if you email the endorsement chair and copy me and say, I've just pulled papers for Saratoga City Council and I want to make sure that I'm on your radar, then that's a good proactive step. But at least for the Democratic Party, if you're registered as a Democrat and pull papers out to run, then we'll and provide some kind of way to reach you, then we will reach out to you.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So the endorsement chair email, is that something you already shared in your slide deck? Sorry if I missed it.
I'll be putting it out on a chat in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll include it in the information that we send. So we'll send the slide deck and some of the information from some of the links that have been asked about in the chat. That's it. We'll send that to everybody.
Super.
But yeah, and then it's always, our stuff's also on the SCCDP.org page. And so if you go to About and look at the executive board, there's a director of endorsements, and his email address is also there. And so that's just an example of how to track that kind of information down.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your coming. I appreciate your interest, whatever it is that brought you here, interest in volunteering, interest exploring and thinking about the idea of being a candidate, the curiosity and interest that brought you here. I'm sure we'd be able to find a meaningful outlet for that, one that would be helpful to the effort and one that would be meaningful to you. So please feel free to reach out as you digest this information. And again, it seems like a lot, but it's really not. It's some paperwork and talking to people and then starting to talk to voters. And so if it's a step you might be ready to take now or at any time in the future, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to meet with you individually and understand your interest and your background and your concerns, and maybe help point you in a positive direction. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I really appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate your being interested in our local party. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, Tammy.
Thanks, everyone.